Donald Trump press secretary just unleashed fury on reporters for disinformation. I would like to show it to you. Let's check it out.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. Since your last briefing, there have been some personnel moves that have been announced by the president, and I wanted to ask you about them. One was the president replacing the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General C.Q. Brown Jr. What was the reason for the president naming a replacement for General Brown? And then I'll follow up with another personnel announcement that's been made over the last few days.
He thinks he's doing a bad job, and it's time for a shakeup at the Pentagon. They failed.
What better reason to get rid of someone if you feel like they're doing a bad job? If you're not doing a good job, it's time for you to go. You had your time, but guess what? Your time is now up.
7 audits in a row. The trust in our United States military amongst the war fighters is low. The president is shaking up the Pentagon and the Department of Defense, of course, with Secretary Hegseth leading, and he has the right to do that. It's actually quite common from administration to do such a thing.
The president...
It's definitely common from administration to administration to put the people in place that they want in place, and it's definitely common for them to do it if they don't feel like the person they have in place is doing a good job or could do the things that they want them to do while they're the sitting president.
When he swore him in as the Chief of Staff for the Air Force, called him a great man and a great gentleman. Does he distance himself from the remarks that he made back in August of 2020?
I think replacing him speaks for itself. James.
Pretty much. I mean, what else needs to be said? If I'm replacing you, I do not stand by the words. Or 4, maybe 5 years ago, things have changed. I thought like that at one point, but I do not think like that at this point. It's the same things for relationship. When you first get with somebody, you have all good things to say about them. But if y'all eventually end up breaking up, obviously you don't feel the same way you felt that about them as you did in the beginning of the relationship.
One other one, if I'm sorry, thank you. On the FBI, the president also announced a new deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino. From what has been reported, and maybe this is not accurate reporting, you can tell me, the FBI director, Kash Patel, informed Republican senators that it would be an individual named as the deputy who was a special agent currently at the FBI, and of course Mr. Bongino is not. What was the reason for naming Mr. Bongino to this position, and was Mr. Patel not correct in making that assurance to those senators?
I'm not sure if anybody in this room has listened to Mr. Bongino when he talks about the past corruption at the FBI, when he talks about his experience serving for the United States Secret Service. This is a man who loves his country and who has honorably served our country in ways that many people have not. He understands the depth of the corruption at these institutions, which the American people reelected President Trump to shake up. And I think it's quite despicable to see many networks in this room who have had chyrons on their television screens labeling Mr. Bongino as a far-right podcaster. He is not. He is a former law enforcement agent. He is a former Secret Service agent who put his life on the line to protect this country, and that is why the President of the United States has entrusted him for this important role. He's also an outsider to this Washington swamp, and we often see that when outsiders are appointed to such coveted positions, a lot of people in this city get very, very nervous, and they should be, because Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Attorney General Bondi are focused on rooting out the corruption at these agencies and ending the weaponization of government once and for all. I'd like to end with something.
I like the fact of what Trump's doing and the people that he's putting in place. If you feel like these places have corruption, it's best to put people in the same position that feel exactly what you do, that dealt with these agencies before and know the corruption that has in it, how well the corruption runs deep. And when you put somebody from the outside that don't have ties to Washington, that haven't been bought off, that haven't been paid off, people get nervous. And the reason they get nervous because they know they did not take the money that they took from them. So they don't have a problem weeding out the corruption because they're not getting paid from the corruption. When people are getting paid from the corruption, they want the corruption to keep going on so they can keep getting the money. I like what Donald Trump's doing. I think this is a great job, and this is why the American people voted for Donald Trump, because they wanted the corruption to be gone.
As you all know, you know what, James? I'm feeling generous. Go ahead.
I will take it. Thank you, Caroline.
Sure.
I wanted to ask
Don't make me regret this.
Please don't.
I wanted to ask about the Macron visit and the Russia-Ukraine talks in general.
Sure.
It's pretty clear to my eye that President Macron was performing a kind of delicate dance, lavishing praise on the president while seeking in his own remarks to try to bind President Trump to positions and even specific language that the president has not committed to heretofore. One of the most bracing comments from President Macron was when he said that the deal that President Trump is negotiating with the Russians must not be, quote, a surrender for Ukraine. All of the public points that we have heard from President Trump, from Secretary Hegseth, and from other administration officials talking about these negotiations have averred to, quite openly, to concessions from the Ukrainians that will have to be made. The minerals deal, the abandonment of their NATO ambitions, and other elements.
Need all that.
So far, we have not heard any administration official suggest a single concession that the Russians should be prepared to make. And so I wonder if you could assure us, at a minimum, that this negotiation process will not be as one-sided as the Europeans seem to think it is, that in fact, President Putin will also be made to engage in some concessions to reach this deal.
Well, I think the president knows how to make a deal better than anyone who has ever assumed the office of the American presidency. And in order to make a deal, you have to bring both sides to the table. And
Facts.
typically, when you make a good deal, both sides leave that table a little bit unhappy. I'm not going to outline the concessions that the president and his team are engaged in discussing. These are obviously ongoing negotiations, and it would be unwise of me to impede them from this podium. But the president has made significant improvements in ending this conflict. He is committed to seeing an end to the war. He wants to see the bloodshed and the killing stopped. He wants to stop seeing young men being killed and slaughtered. This has been going on for far too long. The president inherited this mess because of the incompetence of the previous administration, and he's committed to fixing it. And he's made, some of those concessions clear, but I'm not going to get ahead of him on additional ones. But he is wholeheartedly committed to striking a peace deal in Russia and Ukraine, also in the Middle East. Thank you very much, guys. Good to see you. We'll see you later. Does anybody?
Donald Trump is definitely doing everything that he said that he was going to do. We see concessions from Ukraine. We're going to see concessions from Russia. And like she said, when you're getting a deal done, both sides is going to leave that table losing something that they wanted to have in the deal. Just how it works. Anybody can get this done. It's definitely Donald Trump. We see him already speaking with Putin. We already see him speaking with Ukraine about telling them they have to get minerals. There's only so much that he could tell you right there on the spot because they're working and they're negotiating and stuff behind closed doors. And I'm pretty sure once everything is said and done, they will give out the details. And I'm pretty sure both sides is going to take a loss on this, because at this point the American people are tired of seeing the bodies. We are tired of sending the money over there. We are tired of funding Ukraine. We want this war to come to an end, and we want it to come to an end as soon as possible.
Anybody have questions for Stephen or for Mr. Hassett? Nobody wants to talk about the economy? Sure. IRS? Okay, go ahead.
This would be for either one of you. So we reported, several other outlets have reported that about 3,500 people are due to be lose their jobs at the IRS by the end of the week. If the goal of these spending cuts across the federal government has been to reduce the debt, why impose some of the deepest cuts we've seen so far at the agency responsible for raising revenue for the federal government?
Well, I think our objective is to make sure that the employees that we pay are being productive and effective. And there are many, more than 100,000 people working to collect taxes, and not all of them are fully occupied. And the Treasury Secretary is studying the matter and feels like 3,500 is a small number, and probably can get bigger, especially as we improve the IT at the IRS. And so I think that it's absolutely something that is on the table for good reasons. And the point is that don't just talk about the IRS, talk about all of government. That there are so many places. I live in D.C. You maybe live in D.C. where nobody's going to the buildings. People aren't commuting because nobody's doing their job. We look back and we see that there are all these people doing two jobs while they're getting a government payroll on the payroll. So the point is we're fixing that, and the IRS is a small part of that picture.
So you're saying that everybody...
Pretty much what they're saying is there's a lot of people collecting checks that's not doing their job. Anytime anyone buys a company or take over a company, I'm just using it as a company because they're running America like a business, like a company right now. You want to run efficiently. So if you see people around that's not doing their job, that you got to get rid of them. They go and buy everything line by line. If they don't think you're doing the job up to the standards that they want the job done for, it's no reason to have you there. And it's the reason why they're making these cuts. And I think this is the first wave of cuts. I think there's going to be more waves of cuts coming because you could get more stuff done efficiently just by having the right team and the right people around you. The people that they don't think is right, the people they don't think that's giving 110% to the IRS, there's no reason to have you there. Whether they're there or not, you're going to see things are still going to run as they normally run.
Anybody who's being let go was doing a bad job?
I'm saying that we're studying every agency and deciding who to let go and why. And we're doing so very rationally with a lot of support from analysis.
Because we're
Thank you.
being told by a lot
I think that's very smart. Look at productivity. How long have you been there? How much have you got done? And if you're not up to standard, there's no reason to have you there. You're basically on the clock. This is still money. At every job, you got people that's working hard. You got some people that don't care, and you just got some people that's just there for a paycheck. And like they said, some people are working there and have a whole nother job at the same time that they're supposed to be working for the company. So if you have two jobs, there's nowhere you're focusing on this job. You're giving 50% to this job, and you get 50% to that job. Instead of doing that, you could just put 100% on that job because you will no longer be at this job any longer.
a lot of people who have been let go at other agencies that they were told they were being dismissed because of poor performance, when in some cases, they haven't even had a performance review yet because they've only been on the job a couple of months.
Yeah, I've never seen a person who was laid off for poor performance say that they were performing poorly. Okay.
That was a great answer. The way you answered that question is definitely great because you will never see nobody that get laid off for poor performance saying they have performance. I haven't seen it. I know you haven't seen it. So that was a great way he answered the question.
Good point. Sure, Caitlin.
I have a question. I'll start with you, Kevin Hassett. Thank you for being here. And then I've got a question for Mr. Waltz. On these potential checks that you might send out from Doge, is there a concern as you're thinking through this that they could be inflationary?
Oh, absolutely not, because imagine if we don't spend government money and we give it back to people, then if they spend it all, then you're even. But they're probably going to save a lot of it, in which case you're reducing inflation.
Okay, so
And also, when the government spends a lot, that's what creates inflation. We learned that from Joe Biden. And so if we reduce government spending, then that's reduces inflation. And if you give people money, then they're going to save a bunch of it. And when they save it, then that also reduces demand and reduces inflation.
Okay, so you're not.
I think that's what a lot of people want to do with the money that they get from Donald Trump. It's just like the times in right now, people are saving their money. There's a lot of not knowing what's going on. And the best thing to do when you don't know what's going on is to save the money for a rainy day. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are going to do. They're going to spend some of it on some bills, some groceries, some stuff that they really need. But anything they don't really need, they're going to save it for that rainy day because we all know tomorrow's coming. Bills is coming every month on the 1st. They're going to save some of this money and mostly just pay bills with it.
Worried about it. And
No, I'm
Mr.
not.
Waltz, to follow up on Peter's question, you wrote in an op-ed in the fall of 2023 that, quote, Putin is to blame, certainly like Al-Qaeda was to blame for 9/11. Do you still feel that way now, or do you share the president's assessment as he says Ukraine is to blame for the start of this war?
Well, it shouldn't surprise you that I share the president's assessment on all kinds of issues. What I wrote as a member of Congress was as a former member of Congress. Look, what I share the president's assessment on is that the war has to end.
Yes.
And what comes with that? What comes with that should be, at some point, elections. What comes with that should be peace. What comes with that is prosperity that we've just offered in this natural resources and economic partnership arrangement, an end to the killing.
Yes.
And European security and security for the world. The president's not only determined to do that in Europe, he's determined to do it in the Middle East. And just a few months ago, we had an administration that had tried for 15 months.
Wow.
Week after week, sitting with you here and couldn't get us to a ceasefire, couldn't get our hostages out. Now we're at that point. We're back to maximum pressure on Iran, and we have just begun, and we will drive towards a ceasefire and all of those other steps. I'm not going to pre-negotiate or get ahead of the sequencing of all of that. It's a very delicate situation. But this is a president of peace, and who here would argue against peace?
Okay, so you do share that assessment.
Who will argue against peace? The whole time Joe Biden was in office, we wanted this war to come to an end. We did not want to keep sending money over there. It seemed like every month, every couple of weeks, we were seeing reports on billions and billions of dollars being sent over here while we was over here struggling to pay bills, struggling to get food, struggling to take care of our day-to-day needs. Donald Trump came in the first day, we seen a ceasefire. A week later, we seen hostages being released. So ever since Donald Trump been in there, we have been seeing a lot of movement on this Ukraine-Russia war. The whole time Joe Biden was in there, we only seen movement of our tax dollars going over there to fund that.
And can I follow up? In 2017,
go ahead,
then
Jordan.
President Trump.
Go ahead,
Can I just follow
Jordan.
up
Thank
really
You
So,
just
quickly?
had two questions, Caitlin. Jordan,
Mr.
go ahead.
Mr.
I have an important
Hassett.
follow-up.
Jordan, go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
Mr. Hassett, you were speaking about tariff revenue, and you also addressed a question about the IRS. President Trump has spoken about replacing income tax with tariff revenue, especially with all this waste, fraud, and abuse that we're seeing cut. Is that a possibility?
Absolutely. And in fact, if you think about the China tariff revenue that we're estimating is coming in from the 10% that we just added, plus the de minimis thing, that it's between $500 billion and $1 trillion over 10 years is our estimate. And that's something that is outside of the reductions that markets are seeing through the negotiations up on the Hill. And so we expect that the tariff revenue is actually going to make it much easier for Republicans to pass a bill, and that was the president's plan all along.
And then I have a question for Stephen Miller.
That's what I like about Donald Trump ever since he's been in president, even from his first term. He makes a plan, then he executes the plan to 100% efficiency. He's not just saying stuff that he's going to do this and do that and not do it. He come up with a plan and does everything. And everything that he's doing, he's sticking to his word of putting America first. And this is about time we got a president who is now putting America first.